Welcome back to Gravepath Stories. Tonight, I have 3 true road trip horror stories for you. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed, because once you step onto the grave path, you don't walk alone. I was gripping the steering wheel harder than I needed to, knuckles aching, because Evan had just leaned forward from the back seat and said, "Didn't we pass that marker already?" I didn't answer him right away. I told myself it was fatigue, the kind that sneaks up on you after a long shift underground and an even longer drive ahead. But my eyes were already searching the shoulder of the road, and when the reflective white post slid into view again, my stomach dropped in a way I still feel when I think about it. Mile marker 72. I remember saying it out loud, almost laughing. No, that's not possible. I said it the way you say something you want everyone else to believe, so you don't have to examine it yourself. The engine hummed steadily. The tires sang their thin, constant song against the asphalt, and the speedometer needle held firm. We had been moving the entire time, no stops, no turns, no loops. Behind me there was a shift of weight. Mark cleared his throat. "We're past 72 at least 10 minutes ago." "Different one?" I said. "They repeat sometimes." "They don't," Ivan said. He was young, new to the inspection team, still had that habit of trusting what his senses told him before deferring to authority. "They don't repeat numbers that close." I didn't respond. I couldn't, because the memory had surfaced uninvited the first time we passed it. The post leaning slightly inward, the black numbers scratched and faded. The second time, the same lean, the same scratches, one number chipped just so. That wasn't coincidence. That was repetition. I pressed the accelerator a little more. The road stayed straight. The trees stayed back. The headlights carved the same narrow tunnel ahead of us. I told myself we would hit the next marker soon, and then this would all flatten into a story we'd tell later, the kind you exaggerate over beers. That hope lasted exactly as long as it took for the reflective paint to bloom again in the beams. 72. Mark swore softly. Evan didn't say anything this time. The silence in the cab thickened, not dramatic, just heavy, like air before a headache. I felt heat rising in my chest, a mix of embarrassment and irritation. I hated the idea of losing control in front of them. Hated even more the creeping thought that I wasn't in control at all. I slowed down deliberately. I wanted to see if the marker would appear sooner, later, or not at all. The engine dropped to a lower pitch. Seconds stretched. My eyes flicked between the road and the shoulder, counting heartbeats. When the marker appeared at the exact same interval as before, my mouth went dry. "This isn't funny," Evan said. "No one's joking," Mark replied. I told them to relax. I said maybe the county had messed up the numbering. I said maybe we were more tired than we thought. I kept talking because talking kept the fear from organizing itself into something sharper. Inside, though, my thoughts were tumbling. I knew this road. I had driven it dozens of times. There were no loops, no service roads that fed back into it. No reason we should be seeing the same marker again unless we were turning around, and I knew we weren't. "Pull over," Mark said. I didn't do it right away. There was a part of me, a stubborn, almost childish part, that believed stopping would make it worse. Like if we acknowledged it too directly, Whatever strange alignment we were in would lock into place. Still, the idea of continuing blindly felt worse. When the marker appeared again, closer this time, I eased onto the shoulder. The car idled. The sudden quiet felt loud. My ears rang with it. I turned in my seat, trying to read their faces in the dim interior light. Mark looked pale but composed. Evan looked like he was trying not to panic. Jaw clenched, eyes too wide. "Stay in the car," I said, and opened my door. The night air felt wrong against my skin, not cold or warm, just charged, like static before a spark. My boots crunched softly on gravel as I walked back toward the marker. Up close, it looked exactly as it had every time we passed it, the same lean, the same chip numbers. I reached out and touched it. It was warm. Not sun warmed, not residual heat from a vehicle. Warm in a way that made my hand recoil before my brain could process it. I crouched, shining my flashlight down the length of the post. That was when I saw the nails. They were thick, industrial, the kind you'd use in heavy framing. 3 of them driven through the base of the post and into the asphalt. Fresh. The edges of the holes were dark and glossy, like the road itself had been pierced recently. I felt my pulse in my throat. Mark came up behind me despite my earlier instruction. "What is it?" "It's nailed down," I said. He knelt, ran a finger along one of the nails, then jerked his hand back. "Jesus, it's hot." We stood there for a moment, 2 grown men staring at a mile marker like it was a live thing. Behind us, the engine idled, steady and oblivious. Evan called out from the car, his voice tight. "What's going on?" I didn't know how to answer him. I didn't want to. Eventually, Mark said it for me. "Someone nailed it into the road." "Woo?" Evan asked. Neither of us responded. There was no answer that made sense. We got back into the car. I shut the door harder than necessary, like that could seal the situation out. I put the car in drive and pulled back onto the road. My hands were shaking now, no point pretending otherwise. I drove faster, then faster still, until Mark told me to slow down. The marker appeared again. This time, Evan screamed. It wasn't a long scream. It was sharp, involuntary. The sound of a body reacting before the mind could intervene. I felt something snap inside me then. A line crossed. I slammed the brakes and threw the car into park, tires skidding slightly even at that speed. "That's it," I said. "We're turning around." I cranked the wheel and executed a tight, clumsy turn across the empty road. For a brief, blessed second, the headlights pointed back the way we'd come, and my chest loosened. I accelerated, watching the road behind us unspool. The marker appeared. It slid into view from the opposite direction, same lean, same scratches, facing us like it had been waiting. I laughed then, a brittle, ugly sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. Evan was crying openly now. Mark sat rigid, staring straight ahead. "Stop," he said quietly. "Stop the car." I did. The silence crashed back in. None of us moved. I thought about the nails, about the warmth, about the idea that someone was placing that marker ahead of us every time we moved, fast enough and precisely enough to beat us there. The thought was absurd. It was also the only one that fit. "We can't outrun it," Mark said. "We can't turn around. So we changed something else." "What?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He opened his door, stepped out, and walked back toward the marker with purpose. I followed without thinking. Ivan stayed in the car, sobbing quietly. Mark grabbed the post with both hands and pulled. It didn't budge. He tried again, muscles straining, breath coming hard. Nothing. The nails held firm. "Help me," he said. I put my shoulder into it. The warmth bled through my jacket. The post creaked slightly, just enough to give us hope. We pulled together, grunting, swearing. With a sharp crack, the asphalt around one nail split, a spiderweb of fractures racing outward. The post lurched. We didn't stop. We pulled until the other nails tore free with wet, grinding sounds that made my teeth ache. The marker came loose in our hands, heavy and awkward. For a moment, we just stood there holding it, stunned. Then the road went quiet in a different way. The hum I hadn't noticed before, a low vibration under everything, faded. The air felt normal. My skin stopped prickling. I dropped the marker, and it hit the ground with a dull thud. No longer warm. We left it there. We got back in the car and drove. I don't remember much of the next stretch, only that the road behaved itself. The markers progressed normally. Numbers increased. We didn't see 72 again. We didn't talk much after that. When we reached town and dropped Evan and Mark off, they thanked me like I'd done them a favor, like this was just another rough night. I drove home alone, hands steady again, mind numb. The next day, I went back with a county worker to report the damaged road. We found the marker lying where we'd left it. There were no nails, no cracks. The asphalt was smooth and unbroken. The marker read 73. I don't drive that road anymore. Not because I'm afraid of what's there now, but because I'm afraid of what I might recognize if it decides to follow me again. I am gripping the steering wheel harder than I realize when the radio host clears his throat and says my name. Not a nickname. Not a guess. My full name. The one printed on the court documents, sitting on the passenger seat. The one I am driving 3 hours to finally change. I laugh once. Sharp and automatic, because laughing feels safer than stopping. And I tell myself it is coincidence that radio hosts say lots of names, that this is what nerves do before something important. Then he says I just tapped the brakes for the 3rd time in 1 minute, and my foot slips because I did not remember doing that until he said it. I turn the volume down, then up again, testing myself. The car hums. The road curves the way it has been curving for miles. I say out loud that I am imagining things. My voice sounds steadier than I feel. The radio crackles, and the host laughs softly, like he heard me. He says there is no reason to be nervous today. That some journeys feel heavier because they matter, and my stomach tightens, because that sentence lands exactly where I am trying not to look. I reach to change the station. Every preset lands on static except this one. I twist the dial slowly, then faster. Nothing. I think about the hearing, about the judge's face I have rehearsed in my head, about how many times I have said the sentence, I will say, if anyone asks me why this matters. The radio host says I am checking the stations now, that I always do that when I am scared. And my chest goes cold, because that is true and I have never told anyone that. I pull the car over halfway onto the shoulder without fully deciding to do it. The engine idles. My hands are shaking enough that I sit on them. The radio goes quiet for a beat, and I hope that is it, that the spell is broken, that whatever this is has run out of breath. Then the host says I have stopped, that I am considering turning around, that I am thinking about how easy it would be to miss today and reschedule and pretend I never tried. I whisper stop. He tells me I am whispering. I get out of the car. Gravel shifts under my shoes. The road is empty in both directions, which is not unusual, but the emptiness feels intentional, like something arranged it. The radio continues from inside the car, muffled through the door, narrating the fact that I am standing with my arms crossed, that my jaw is locked, that my phone is in my pocket, and I am thinking about calling someone who would tell me this is impossible. He says I will not call because I do not want witnesses yet. I open the door and slam it harder than necessary. The sound is satisfying. I sit back down and start driving again because stopping feels worse. The host thanks me for continuing. He says progress matters. He says today is about names and truth and the cost of being heard. I tell him to shut up. He tells me my voice cracked on the word truth. The updates start coming faster. He describes the shape of the next curve before I see it. He mentions the old sign I barely notice until he points it out. He warns me to slow down because there is a patch of road that always pulls the tires to the left, and when it does, when the wheel tugs, I feel like something inside me has been reached into and squeezed. I slow down. He says thank you. I ask who he is. He says he is the voice that keeps people company when they are alone. I ask how he knows me. He says I have been listening longer than I think. He says he has been waiting for a day when my destination mattered more than my fear. I tell him I am not afraid. He pauses, then says the pause itself proves him right. I think about turning the car around anyway, about how if I do, this will all stop. Because stories like this only work if you keep going. The host laughs gently and says I am underestimating how much I want what is at the end of this road. He says he is not here to stop me. He says he is here to make sure I arrive honestly. The radio tone changes. The music fades out completely. The host stops sounding like a person and starts sounding like a system reading alerts. He says my speed. He says my heart rate. And I know he cannot know that. But the number he gives matches the pounding in my ears. He says I am remembering the first time I told someone who I was and how they smiled and then did not call me again. He says memory makes the body loud. I tell myself this is stress, that the brain is good at filling gaps, that there is a rational explanation I will laugh about later. The host says rational explanations are often just stories we tell after the fact. He says stories can still hurt while they are happening. He says he is going to start being more specific now. He describes the scar on my left hand. He describes the way I tuck my thumb under my fingers when I grip the wheel. He says the name on my license out loud, the old one, slowly, carefully, like he is tasting it. I shout him to stop using it. He says he will when it stops hurting to hear it. I feel tears come and hate myself for how relieved I am that no one can see me. The road narrows. Trees press closer. The host tells me not to speed up. He says speeding up never helped me before. He says I am trying to outrun something that lives inside the car with me. I ask him if he is going to hurt me. He says no. He says I am going to hurt myself if I keep pretending this is not real. I see a police car parked ahead, angled slightly toward the road. My first instinct is relief. Authority, sanity. The host says do not stop. He says there is no one inside it. I slow anyway. because the idea of help is stronger than his warning. As I pass, I glance over and see that the driver's seat is empty, the door slightly ajar, the interior dark. The host says thank you for not stopping. He says he does not want me distracted. My phone buzzes. I do not look at it. The host says it is a reminder for my hearing. He says the time. He says if I stop now, I will be late. He says being late would be a familiar way to avoid being seen. I look at the phone anyway. The notification is exactly what he said it was. My hands go numb. I ask him what he wants. He says he wants me to listen all the way through. He says most people change the station before the end. He says today is different because I cannot. He says he is going to tell me what happens if I arrive. He tells me the hearing will go smoothly. He tells me the judge will be brisk but fair. He tells me I will sign my name and feel lighter and heavier at the same time. He tells me I will walk out and sit in my car and cry because endings are loud even when they are good. He tells me this because he wants me to know he is not my enemy. Then he tells me what happens if I turn around. He describes the call I will make later, the way my voice will sound apologetic but rehearsed. He describes the email I will draft and never send. He describes how this road will keep showing up in my dreams, how the radio will crackle in other cars, other days, always stopping just short of saying my name. He says avoidance has a long memory. I tell him I hate him. He says hate is fine. He says hate means I am still engaged. He says indifference would be worse. The road dips and rises. My breathing steadies a little. I realize I am still driving toward the courthouse town, that I have not turned around, that some part of me decided without asking permission. The host's voice softens. He says this is the part where people usually ask if they are being punished. He says I am not. He says I am being witnessed. He says there is a difference. He says sometimes being seen feels like an attack when you have spent a long time hiding. I tell him he does not get to decide that. He agrees. He says I do. He says his job is to keep narrating until I do. The updates slow again. He describes smaller things now. He says I am adjusting the mirror. He says I am rolling my shoulders to shake out the tension. He says I am closer than I think. I see the outskirts of town. Traffic appears. Other cars. Ordinary life. The host lowers his voice, as if respecting the presence of others. He says he cannot go with me inside. He says he will stay on the air until I turn the engine off. He says this is where he stops talking about my body and starts talking about choice. At the last light before the courthouse, it turns red. I stop. The host says this is the last chance to turn. He says he will not narrate the turn if I do. He says silence can be a mercy. My hands are steady now. I feel like myself in a way I have not all morning. I say I am going through the light when it changes. He says he knows. The light turns green. I drive. The courthouse comes into view, plain and solid. I pull into the parking lot and turn off the engine. The radio clicks off mid-sentence, leaving a hole where his voice was. The sudden quiet makes my ears ring. I sit there for a long time, breathing, feeling the afterimage of being watched fade slowly. Inside, the hearing happens the way he said it would. Outside, afterward, I sit in my car and cry. When I turn the engine back on, the radio comes to life with music. No voice. No updates. Just a song I do not recognize but like anyway. I drive home later in silence by choice. and the road behaves like a road. I tell you this now, because I need someone else to hold it with me. I have driven that highway again since then. The radio has never spoken to me like that again. But sometimes, when I am alone and something matters, I swear I hear a breath before the music starts, like a reminder that being heard has a cost, and that I paid it. I was already buckled in when Dad started the engine again, and that was when I noticed the yellow koala keychain was gone. It had always hung from the glove box handle, swinging into my knees when the van hit bumps. I reached for it without thinking, like I always did, and my fingers closed on air. I remember saying, "Mum, where's Cola?" And she answered too fast, without turning around, that it must have fallen earlier. That was the first moment something felt wrong, though I didn't know why yet. We had only stopped for a few minutes. Dad needed the toilet, Mum bought drinks, and I stayed in the van counting trucks. I hadn't gotten out. I was sure of that. When we pulled back onto the road, everything felt the same at first. The engine sounded right. The seats smelled like us. My backpack was still at my feet. But then I noticed the crack in the dashboard was gone. Dad's van had a long split near the radio, like a lightning bolt. I traced it when I was bored. I looked now and saw smooth plastic instead. I leaned forward and pressed my thumb where the crack should be. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice normal, "did you fix the dash?" He frowned. "What dash?" "The broken bit," I said. It was right there. Mum turned slightly in her seat and smiled, but her smile looked stretched. "You're imagining things. You always do when you're tired." I wanted to argue, but something in her voice stopped me. I sat back and hugged my knees. That's when I saw the child's seat beside me was different. Mine had a faded sticker of a cartoon frog peeling off the side. This one was clean, newer. No frog. I felt a tightness in my chest I didn't have words for yet. I checked the floor. My red shoe was still there, scuffed the same way from when I dragged it behind my bike. So some things were right. Others weren't. I told myself maybe Mum cleaned. Maybe Dad fixed things without telling me. Grown-ups did that. We drove for a while in silence. The road felt longer than it should have. I kept expecting the bend near the big fence, but it didn't come. My stomach started to hurt, the slow kind that made you feel hollow. I asked how much longer, and Dad said not long, but he didn't sound sure. I reached into the side pocket where Mum kept tissues and found a phone that wasn't hers. It was black, older, heavier. I knew Mum's phone had a pink case with a crack like a spider web. I held this one up. "Mum." She turned fully then. Her face went pale in a way I had never seen. Dad slowed the van without saying anything. The phone slipped from my fingers onto the seat. "That's not ours," Mum said quietly. Dad pulled over. Not sharply, but like he didn't trust his hands. We sat there with the engine running. I could hear my own breathing, loud in my ears. Dad picked up the phone and turned it on. A photo filled the screen. It was a family. A mum, a dad, and a kid about my age. They were standing in front of this van. "This isn't funny," Dad said, but his voice shook. Mum whispered, "Check the plates." Dad got out. I watched him in the side mirror, bending down, staring too long. When he came back in, he didn't sit right away. He stood there with the door open like he needed air. "They're different," he said. Same model. Different number. Mum put a hand over her mouth. I felt cold all over, like when you get out of the pool too fast. "Where's our van?" I asked. Neither of them answered. We went back to the rest stop. Or tried to. Dad turned around, following the road back the way we came, but it didn't feel right. The signs didn't match what I remembered. The trees looked wrong. Too close. Too quiet. After a while, Mum said, "We're past this already," and Dad slammed his hands on the wheel. We pulled into a police station in a small town I didn't recognize. Dad told them everything, talking fast, tripping over words. Mum kept her hand on my shoulder like she was afraid I'd vanish. The officers listened, exchanged looks, then asked to see the van. One of them went still when he looked inside. "This is the one," he said softly. "The one what?" Dad asked. The officer swallowed. "There was a report earlier tonight. Family vanished. Same van. Same stretch of road." And Mum started crying then, real crying, the kind that scares you. I sat very still. My head felt full, like it might split. They searched for our van all night. They found it in the morning, parked at the same rest stop, empty. Doors unlocked. Our things inside, just as we'd left them. The koala keychain was hanging from the glove box, swinging gently. The other family was never found. The police told us we were lucky. That word made me angry, though I didn't know how to explain why. We drove home in our van, all of us quiet. Sometimes I think about the kid from the photo. I wonder if he noticed things missing too, or if he never got the chance. I still check dashboards when I get into cars. I still count keychains. And every time we stop on a long drive, I make sure I watch the van the whole time. Because I know now how easily you can get into the wrong one, and how hard it is to come back.